Johnny, the war in Ukraine, the war in bloody Israel, there's wars everywhere. We're just... Wars? No, we're not talking about wars today, Johnny. Well, what are we going to talk about? We're talking about the book, 1984, and politicians. 1984? But so what's so interesting about that? I mean, the book come out bloody 80 years ago or whatever. Seems to be like sort of a blueprint of how we're bloody running the bloody world. And how we're running the world doesn't seem to be very bloody good.
In this video, we are going to explore some of the similarities between the totalitarian systems of the 20th century and Orwell's 1984. And as will become evident, many of these totalitarian traits are re-emerging in the modern world.
But Johnny, what if no one? But Johnny.
Now, if every politician, before they were bloody signed up, sworn in or whatever it is, before that, they had to read the 1984, and not only read it, but they had to do some sort of an exam or questionnaire about it, so that they could, every politician, so it could be proven that they had read the book. They'd have to do that before they went and sat in Parliament. Right, yeah. Now it may seem strange, Johnny, but the book, it's got written there right in black and white about what the hell is going to happen and where we're heading. But no one seems to be saying, hey, wait a minute, we've got to stop doing this, that or the other, because that's what happened in 1984 and we saw how that worked out. No one does that. They just carry on with their bullshit bloody
The purpose of this all-encompassing program of psychological warfare is to bewilder the mind of the average citizen. For when the citizen is bombarded with contradictions and lies and lives in what Orwell called that shifting phantasmagoric world in which black may be white tomorrow and yesterday's weather can be changed by decree, he or she eventually ceases to know what to think.
Not about NATO expansion.
It was never about NATO enlargement.
It's not about NATO.
It's not about NATO expanding toward Russia.
This was never about NATO.
It's absolutely nothing to do with NATO expansionism.
And it has nothing to do with NATO.
This is not about NATO.
It's not about NATO.
It's not really about NATO.
This is not about NATO.
Seriously, it's not about NATO.
This was never about NATO.
It was never about NATO. Let's be honest.
This doesn't have anything to do with NATO.
Nothing to do with NATO at all.
Yeah, it's like security purposes, but we can see the clear reason.
But NATO is not the reason.
This is not about NATO expansion. This is about the democratic expansion.
Ukraine bans religious order.
And there should be some sort of committee, some sort of bloody government committee, they do them all the time, some committee that looks at every decision they make, these bloody politicians, and ascertains whether the bloody policy they're pushing or bringing in or the law is going to move them more towards a 1984 scenario or not. And if it is going to lead us into a bloody 1984 scenario, then they've got to make some changes or drop the fucking law altogether. But Johnny, what sort of sanctions could you have against politicians who don't want to read 1984? What can happen? Well, probably... Well, we could put them in lockdown. Yeah, that's right, lockdown. Any politician that doesn't bloody read the book and do the exam and then be completely indoctrinated against the world turning into 1984, they have to go into lockdown. Lockdowns? But Johnny, aren't lockdowns what we're probably fighting against with this?
Shortly after 1984 was published, Orwell explained, "The moral to be drawn from this dangerous nightmare situation is a simple one. Don't let it happen. It depends on you."
Well, Johnny, we can only hope and pray